In this video, I'm going to explain a lesson I did on linear transformations of data. And I did this whole lesson using Autograph. So I started off by creating a set of data. So to do that in Autograph, I came up to the button up here, create a set of data. And when you click on that, you get open up this data box here. I'm going to call this the original data, because we're going to be transforming this in a moment using Autograph. And I just created a random distribution. I picked rectangular, and I said we're going to do it from 1 to 6. And we talked about what that meant, and that this was basically creating rolls of the dice in this case. And I said to make it nice, we put it up to 120. So how many would we expect of each of the numbers to happen? And we discussed that. And then I said, well, when I hit create sample, it creates 120 rolls of the dice in here. And then all we do is we click OK, and that data is stored now. And to see that data, we're going to use what the Autograph calls a dot plot. And we press that, we make sure these are both set to 1 to make it look nice, and there we go, we have our dot plot. And that shows very clearly the heights of each bar. But to make it a bit clearer for my students, I decided to go into the axes and change this, the pips for the y direction, to 2, so that there'd be a line every 2 going up the y-axis. And there we go, we can see that a lot clearer now. I asked them to calculate the mean and the standard deviation and the median from this, and then we made use of the statistics box in Autograph as well. And once they'd done their calculations, we check them out here. We can see we've got the mean, the standard deviation, the range, lower quartile, median, and upper quartile. So all these things are things they have to be able to work out. And here we just did it rather than from a frequency table, from a dot plot. What I then said was, well, what would happen if the game, when we rolled the dice, we actually added on 10 to our score? What would happen to the mean and the standard deviation in particular, but all the averages? So what I did is I went into here and I selected the whole column and I copied it by pressing Ctrl C, and then I created a new set of data and I pasted that by pressing Ctrl V into there. And I said, well, what happens if we do this change and we call it plus 10? We want to add 10 to the data. An Autograph can do that for us. We do X plus 10 in this box here, and then we hit the Scale X button, and every value has 10 added to it. So I said, well, what's going to happen to the mean and the standard deviation? And the kids had to think about what was going to happen. And then once they'd come up with their answers, most of them said the mean will increase by 10, the standard deviation will increase by 10. I said, well, let's have a look. So I put the dot plot on, made sure that this was set to 1 and this was set to 1, so it was nicely evenly spread out still, and hit OK. The data's gone off the side, so we had to up this up to 20 so we can see it. And then we can see the two sets of data side by side. The original in red, and the new, once we've added 10 on, in blue. And as soon as we saw that, the students were immediately aware that the standard deviation hadn't changed. The spread is still the same. It's the same graph, just shifted. So the mean has changed, but the standard deviation hasn't. And to confirm that, we look back in our statistics box, and our mean, which was 3.5, is now 13.5, and our standard deviation has stayed the same at 1.74642. Next, I said, well, what's going to happen if instead of adding 10, I open up a box, I paste my data in? What if this time, if the change is times by 3? I got them to think about what was going to happen, and most of them said, well, the mean will multiply by 3, but the standard deviation will stay the same. So we put 3x in here this time to change the data, and watch that 2. When we hit this, the 2 becomes a 6. Everything gets multiplied by 3, and we hit OK, and that's the change times 3. Once again, once they'd had a discussion about what they thought was going to happen, I hit dot plot, change these both to 1 so that they looked similar, had the same settings as the other two, and hit OK. And we get the purple one. And here they can, well, as soon as that popped up, they could immediately see that actually the standard deviation must have changed because it's much more spread out than it was. So the purple one shows us what happens when we multiply by 3. And once again, we talked about what was going on, and then we looked at the statistics, and we saw that the mean had indeed been multiplied by 3, as most of them thought, but the standard deviation had also been multiplied by 3. As a final challenge, I then asked them to work out what would happen if we were to do the default transformation, that's 2x minus 3 on the data. So this is the change of 2x minus 3, this data, sorry, minus 3. And then I'm going to scale it, and it changes all the data again, and I hit OK. And I got them to think about what was going to happen, come up with the standard deviation and the mean. And then once they'd come up with that, and by this point they were all pretty much correct, I hit dot plot to show them what was going on. Make sure these both say 1 again. And we can see the green there represents that last one. Now we do have to be a little bit careful because actually some of our data has popped off the end. So we need to change our scale so we can see the ones on -1 there. But now you can see that compared to the red one, the standard deviation, the spread has doubled, and the mean has doubled and shifted. And once again, we look at this, standard deviation has doubled, but the mean has doubled and had the -3 taken away from it. And once we'd done that discussion, we talked about what was going on, we recapped all the rules. I then used this Excel spreadsheet that I put together, which creates random questions, 6 questions. The first 3 are just basic transformations, and then the next 3 are questions in a wordy context. And if we needed a bit more practice, I just press F9, it's still random, and it creates a new set of questions every time. And then once they were done, I could pull this in here, and the solutions were all at the side here so they can check their answers. So that was the lesson I did today on linear transformations of data and the effects that they have on mean and standard deviation, making use of the scale option in Autograph.